We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, everyone. This is Abe, your host. It is day 2 on my vacation. It is July 15th, Monday, 2024, the year of our Lord. Yeah, it's looking weird out there with the whole Trump assassination attempt going on. Check out my previous video that came out this morning, please. It was basically a deep dive in the shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks, and his backstory. A little more conspiracy stuff of weird stuff that's been going on. We are in a fog of war situation in America. A fog of war situation as far as real news, fake news, and conspiracy. It's a hot time for my type of gig. But today, we're going to have some fun and a little bit of entertainment. Still conspiracy related, but a break. A break from all the craziness. Let's get back into this series that we've been doing. Leave the World Behind. And today we are starting off with Chapter 8. So, let's get into it. And when we last left off, go check that episode out. It's Leave the World Behind, The White Lion. It is basically knock on the door, mysterious, creepy figures. Everyone in the house is freaking out except for the children who are asleep. Who could it be? Who could it be? Let's get back into it. Recognizing people was one of Amanda's skills. She bought cocktails for the apparatchiks from Minneapolis and Columbus and St. Louis who paid her. She remembered who was who and asked after their families. There was a point of pride. She looked at the man and saw only a black man she had never seen before. You know one another, Clay was assured. The breeze raised the hair on his legs. We've not had the pleasure of meeting face to face. The man had the practice of a salesman, which was, ultimately, what he was. My name's G.H. The letters meant nothing to her. Amanda couldn't figure whether he was trying to spell something. George. The woman thought the name more gentle than the initials. And this was a moment when they needed to seem human. You never knew who had guns and was ready to stand their ground. He's George. He thought of himself as George. He spoke of himself as G.H. George, right, I'm George. This is, our house. Possession was some fraction of the law, and Amanda had deluded herself. She'd been pretending that this was their house. I'm sorry, she said. This is our house, he said again. We emailed back and forth about the house. We tried to sound firm, but also gentle. Amanda remembered, then GHW@WashingtonGroupFund.com. The formal opacity of those initials. The place was comfortable, but sufficiently anonymous that she had not bothered to try to picture its owners, and now, seeing them, She knew that if she had bothered to picture them, her picture would have been incorrect. This didn't seem to her like the sort of house where black people lived in. But what did she mean by that? This is your house? She said. So there we go again, getting into the whole race baiting and woke SJW propaganda bullshit, trying to stir up helter skelter, All white people are racist, Clay was disappointed. They were paying for the illusion of ownership. They were on vacation. He closed the door, leaving the world out there where it belonged. We are so sorry to bother you. Ruth still had her hand on George's shoulder. Well, they were inside. They'd accomplished something. Why had Clay closed the door, invited these people in? It was so like him. He always wanted to handle the business of life, but was not fully prepared to do so. Amanda wanted proof. She wanted to inspect the mortgage, a photo ID. These people and their disheveled clothes could be, well, they looked more like evangelists than criminals. Hopeful pamphleteers come to witness Jehovah. He gave us a bit of a fright. Clay didn't mind confessing his own cowardice, since it had passed. A bit barely counted, and it was, importantly, their fault. Goodness, it's cold out of all of a sudden. It is. GH was as good as anyone as predicting how other people would behave. But it took time. They were inside. That's what mattered. Summer storm? Maybe it'll pass. They were four adults standing around awkwardly, as in those last anticipatory moments at an orgy. Amanda was furious at everyone. Clay most of all. She twitched. Certain one of these people would produce a gun, a knife, a demand. She wished she still had been holding the telephone, though who could say how long it would take for the local precinct to get to their beautiful house in the deep of the woods. She didn't even say anything. GH was ready. He had prepared. Tried to guess how these people might react. I understand how strange it must be for you, us turning up like this, unannounced. Unannounced, Amanda inspected the word, and it didn't hold up to scrutiny. We'd have called, you see, but, the phones. There you go. Blackout, baby. They'd have called? Did these people have her number? I'm Ruth. She extended a hand. Every couple appointed labor by strength, even or especially at such moments. Her role was to shake hands and make nice and put these people at ease so they could get what they wanted. Clay. He shook her hand. And you're Amanda, Ruth smiled. Amanda took the stranger's manicured hand. If calluses meant honest labor, did softness imply dishonesty? Yes, she said. And I'm GH again. Clay, nice to meet you. Clay applied more pressure than he normally might have, as if he had a point to prove. And Amanda, it's nice to meet face to face. Amanda crossed her arms over her chest. Yes. Though I have to admit that I wasn't expecting to meet you at all. No, of course not. Maybe we should sit down? It was their house. What was Clay supposed to do? That would be lovely. Ruth had the smile of a politician's wife. Sit? Yes, fine. Amanda tried to communicate something to her husband, but one look couldn't contain it. Maybe in the kitchen we'll have to be quiet, though. The children are sleeping. The children, of course. I hope we didn't wake them. GH should have guessed there would be children, but maybe that helped the situation. Archie could sleep through a nuclear bomb. I'm sure they're fine. Clay was his usual joking self. I think I'll just go check on them. Amanda was icy, and tried to imply that it was her habit to peer in at her sleeping children every so often. They are fine. Clay couldn't understand what she was up to. I'm just going to check on them. Why don't you... She didn't know how to complete the thought, and she did not bother. Let's sit. Clay gestured at the stools at the kitchen island. Clay, I should explain. G.H. took this on as a masculine burden, like arranging rental cars for trips out of town. He thought another husband might understand. As I said, I would have called. We tried to. Actually, but there's honestly no service. We've stayed not far from here a couple summers ago. Clay wanted to establish that he had some hold on this geography, that he knew what it was like to have a house in the country. Impossible to get signal most of the time. That's true, G.H. said. He sat up, put his elbows on the marble, leaned forward. But I'm not sure if that's what's happening at the moment. What's that? Clay felt he should offer them something. Weren't they guests, or was he the guest? Can I get you some water? Down the dark hall, Amanda used her cell phone as a light, having confirmed that Archie and Rose still existed, lost in the unworried sleep of children. She tarried, just out of sight, straining to engage. She gazed at it as if it were a mirror, but it did not recognize her. Maybe the hallway was too dark and did not come to life. Amanda pressed the home button, and it lit up, showing her a news alert. The barely legible T of the New York Times, and only a few words. Major blackout reported on the east coast of the United States. She jabbed at it, but the application did not open. Just the white screen of the thinking machine. This was a specific flavor of irritation. She couldn't be mad, but she was. Tonight, we were at the symphony. G.H. was in the middle of his explanation. In the Bronx. He's on the board of the Philharmonic. It couldn't be helped. She and George believed in giving back. It's to encourage people to take an interest in classical music, Ruth was over-explaining. Amanda came into the room. The kids are okay? Clay did not understand that this had been only pretense. They're fine. Amanda wanted to show her husband her phone. She didn't have any news beyond those 11 words, but it was something and represented some advantage over these people. We were driving back to the city, home. Then something happened. He wasn't trying to be vague. Even in the car, he and Ruth hadn't spoken of, because they were afraid. A blackout. Amanda produced this triumphant. How did you know? G.H. was surprised. He had expected to have to explain. They'd seen nothing but darkness all the way out, and then, through the trees, the glow of their own house. They couldn't believe it because it didn't make sense. But they didn't care to make sense. The relief of light and its safety. A blackout? Clay was expecting something worse. I got a news alert. Amanda took her phone from her pocket and put it on the counter. What did it say? Ruth wanted more information. She'd seen it with her own eyes but knew nothing. Did it say why? Just that there was a blackout on the East Coast. She looked at her phone again, but the alert was gone, and she didn't know how to return to it. It is windy outside. Clay felt that the cause of the effect was clear. It's hurricane season. Wasn't there news about a hurricane? Amanda couldn't recall. A blackout, G.H. nodded. So we thought. Well, we live on the 14th floor. The traffic lights would have all gone out. It would have been chaos. Ruth didn't want to bother explaining in more detail. The city was as unnatural as it was possible to be. Accretion of steel and glass and capital, and light was fundamental to its existence. A city without power was like a flightless bird. an accident of evolution. A blackout? Clay felt like he was simply offering the word to someone who had forgotten it. There's been a blackout. That doesn't seem so bad. Amanda didn't buy it. It didn't seem true. The lights seemed to be working here. She was right, of course. Still, everyone looked at the pendants over the kitchen island, like four people seeking hypnosis. You couldn't explain electricity at all, neither its presence nor its absence. Were her words an act of hubris? There was the sound of wind against the window over the sink. Immediately thereafter the lights flickered. Not once, nor twice, 4 times, like a message in Morse code that they had to decipher. Like a succession of flashbulbs. But it held steady. It held course. The light had been the night at bay. The 4 of them had breathed in sharply. All 4 of them exhaled. Chapter 9. Jesus Christ! The Lord's name in vain meant blasphemy, but also fertility. Jesus cared nothing for Clay, but the power didn't go out. Clay had already imagined Amanda and the other woman. What was her name? Screaming. Maybe it was unkind to equate femininity with fear. He'd have to reason with them. A windy night, a far-off corner of Long Island. The world was so big that much of it was remote. You could forget this if you lived too long in the city. Electricity was a miracle. They should be grateful. It's fine, G.H. said to himself and to his wife. So there was a blackout. And you drove all the way out here? Amanda couldn't make sense of this. Manhattan was so far away. It didn't make any sense. These roads, they're familiar. I barely even thought about it. We saw the lights go, and I looked at Ruth. G.H. didn't know how he would explain what he didn't entirely understand. We thought we might stay, Ruth said. No sense dancing around it. Ruth had always been direct. You thought you might stay here? Amanda knew these people wanted something, but we are staying here. We knew we couldn't drive into the city. We knew that we couldn't walk up 14 flights, so we drove out here and thought you might understand. Of course, Clay said, understanding. Amanda looked at her husband. What he means is, of course we understand. Did she, though? What if this was some con? I know it's a surprise. Maybe you can. This is our house. We wanted to be safe in our house, safe. While we figured out what's going on, G.H. said, and he was being honest. But it still seemed like he was selling something. It's our good luck we had gas, Ruth nodded. Honestly, I don't know how much farther we could go. Aren't there any hotels? Amanda was trying to be rude, but she knew this sounded rude. We've rented the house. Clay was thinking it over. He began to say something. He was persuaded. Of course you've rented the house, G.H. said. He knew they'd talked about money because most conversations got there eventually. Money was his subject. It was no matter. We could, of course, offer you something. We know it's an inconvenience. We are on vacation, Amanda thought. Inconvenience, too mild of a word. It was like a euphemism. That he'd been so quick to bring money into it seemed more dishonest. G.H. had silvered hair, tortoiseshell glasses, a gold watch. He had presence. He sat higher in his seat. Clay, Amanda, he said. This was something he'd learned at business school in Cambridge. When to deploy first names. I could absolutely refund you your money. You want us to leave? In the middle of the night? My children are sleeping. And you just come in here and start talking about refunding our money? I should call the company. Can you even do that? Amanda walked to the living room to get her computer. Maybe there's a phone number on the website. I'm not saying you should leave, GH laughed. We can refund you, say, 50% of what you paid. You know, there's an in-law suite. We'll stay downstairs. 50%? Clay liked the promise of a less expensive vacation. I really think we ought to look at the terms and conditions, Amanda said, opening the laptop. Of course, it's not working now. Maybe the Wi-Fi needs to be reset. Let me try. Clay reached towards his wife's computer. I don't need your help, Clay. She did not like the implication of her inability. They both had a proximity to youth, college kids for him, for Amanda an assistant and junior staff. They'd both been subject to the humiliating inversion, watching, gleaning, imitating like toddlers playing at dress-up. Once you were past a certain age, this was how you learned. You had to master technology or be mastered by it. It's not connected. We heard the emergency broadcast system. Ruth thought this explained a great deal. I thought to turn on the radio. This is the emergency broadcast system. Her tone was not mocking but faithful, sounding the right stresses and intonation. Not a test. Do you understand? Not. This is only a test. That's the only way I've ever heard it. So I didn't even notice it at first. Then I kept listening and I heard it again and again and again. This is not a test. This is an emergency broadcast system. Emergency? Amanda said, trying to be logical. But of course a blackout, I guess it's kind of an emergency. Surely, that's one of the reasons we thought it's best to just come home. It could be unsafe out there, GH said, resting his case. Well, we have a lease agreement. Amanda invoked the law. Fine. At the moment, that document was filed away in a cyberspace, a shelf they could not reach. Also, the whole business felt off in some sort of way she could not explain. May I? GH pushed his stool back and walked to the desk. He took the car keys from his blazer pocket and unlocked a drawer. He produced an envelope, the sort provided by a bank, and flipped through the currency inside of it. We could give you $1,000 right now for the night. That would cover almost half of what you're paying for the week, I think. Clay tried not to, but he always felt moved in a particular way by the sight of tons of money. He wanted to count it. Had the envelope just been in the drawer in the kitchen all this time? He wanted a cigarette. $1,000? He said. There is an emergency outside. Ruth wanted to remind them of this. It seemed amoral to have to pay them, but she hadn't expected anything else. It's up to you, GH said. He knew how to persuade someone. Of course, we would be very grateful. We could show you how grateful we are. Then tomorrow, we'll know a little more. We'll figure it out. He did not commit to leaving, which was very important. Clay continued to prod his wife's work-issued computer. This doesn't seem to be responding. His intention had been pure. He wanted to be the one to show them that the world was chugging along and that people were still photographing their Aperol spritzes and tweeting invective about the mismanaged public transport system. In the minutes since that news alert had been issued, some intrepid reporter had likely figured the whole thing out. He could still hear the wind that he blamed. It was always some innocent thing. Anyway, I think one night. Perhaps we could discuss this privately, Amanda said, not wanting to leave these people unattended. Right, of course, GH nodded, like this was the most sensible thing. He put the fat little envelope down on the counter. Yeah, said Clay, flustered. He didn't know what there was to discuss besides that bundle of money. Maybe we'll just go into the other room? Say, you wouldn't mind if we have a drink? Clay shook his head. GH used the keys once more, unlocking a tall cabinet by the sink. He rummaged around inside. We'll be right back. Make yourself... Amanda didn't finish the sentence because it seemed, honestly, too silly to. One more chapter and we'll top this episode off. Chapter 10. It was colder in the master bedroom, where the chill was something they carried with them. Why do you tell them they could stay? She was angry. Clay thought it was perfectly obvious. There had been a blackout. They got scared. They're old. He whispered this, felt that it was disrespectful to point out. They are strangers. She said it like he was an idiot. Had no one ever warned Clay about strangers? Stranger danger! Well, they introduced themselves. They just knocked on the door in the middle of the night. Amanda couldn't believe they were discussing this. She believes in vampires. You have to invite them in. Well, it's better than if they just burst through the door. Wasn't there that their right? They scared the shit out of me, she said. Now that the fear had passed, Amanda could admit to it. It was an insult. The temerity of these people to scare her. They scared me too. Clay was downplaying it. It was in the past, but they're just a little frightened themselves, I think. They don't know what else to do, honey. Their one-time therapist had long ago urged Amanda not to be angry when Clay failed to act as she might have. People could not be blamed for being who they were. Still, she faulted him for it. Clay was too easily taken, too reluctant to stand up for himself. Here's an idea. Go to a hotel. It is their house, honey. These beautiful rooms seemed like theirs, but they weren't. You had to respect that, Clay thought. We rented it, Amanda was whispering still. Where are the kids going to stay? Clay couldn't imagine what the children would say, or whether they would say anything. The kids cared only for what directly affected them. And they let very little affect them, honestly. The presence of strangers might mean better behavior, but even that couldn't be counted upon. The children might bicker, swear, burp, sing, no matter who might overhear. What if they murder us? Amanda felt her husband was not paying attention. Why would they murder us? This was hard to answer. Why does anyone murder anyone? I don't know. Satanic ritual? Some weird fetish? Revenge? I don't know. Clay laughed. They're not gonna murder us, dude. Don't you read the news? This was in the news. The elderly black murderers are roaming Long Island, preying on unsuspecting vacationers. We didn't ask for any proof. I didn't even hear their car. Did you? I didn't. But it is windy outside. We were watching TV. Maybe we just didn't hear it. And maybe they snuck up the road to, I don't know, to cut our throats. I think we should just honestly, dude, just calm down. It's a con. You think they sent a fraudulent news alert to your cell phone? They're more sophisticated criminals than I had ever guessed. It just feels a little improvised is all, and suspicious. They want to stay here with us. I don't like it. Rose is just down the hall. A strange man, what if he sneaks in there and I don't want to think about it? You don't think he'd molest Archie, though. Amanda, listen to yourself. Seriously? She's a girl, okay? I'm a mother. I'm supposed to be protective. And I just don't like I don't like the way the whole thing sounds. I don't even think this is their house. Honey, he had the keys. He did. She lowered her voice still more. What if he's the, I don't know, handyman? What if she is the maid? What if this is just a scam and the blackout or whatever is just a coincidence? She was at least appropriately ashamed by her conjecture. But those people didn't look like the sort to own such a beautiful house. They might, though, I don't know, clean it. He took that envelope out of the drawer. Sleight of hand. How do you know that drawer was locked? Maybe he just fiddled with his keys. I can't understand what they got out of giving us $1,000, honey. Amanda picked up her phone to Google the man. WashingtonGroupFund.com seemed too opaque. Probably fraudulent. The phone had nothing to offer her. Her daughter was asleep down the hall. Also, he looks familiar to me. Like, really. There she goes. Ha! Thinking every black person looks the same. Once again, race baiting. Well, I've never seen him before. You're terrible with faces, Clay said, never recognizing the children's, teachers, and often accidentally passed long-standing neighbors on the street without acknowledging them. She knew he liked to think this implied that he was lost in thought, when really he was merely inattentive. I don't believe this bullshit about the emergency broadcast system. We were just watching TV. That's easy enough. Clay walked down the short hall. He pointed the remote control at the screen mounted on the wall. He had half hoped, more than half, to broadcast some pornography there. It added a certain twist to things, but the technology was hard for him to pace. You had to get the television and computer to cooperate. The television, it did light up. The screen was that blank digital blue. Huh, that's weird. Is it on the right channel? I was watching this morning. I think it's out. But it's not the emergency broadcast system. The satellite is probably out. It's probably the wind. Amanda was not going to be persuaded, because she could sense those people trying to persuade them. There was dishonesty in it. Fine, it's a glitch. But they said they heard that on the radio. The one doesn't mean the other isn't true. Why are you working so hard to believe everyone but your own wife? She said. I'm only trying to calm you down. I'm not saying I don't believe you, but... He hesitated. He didn't believe her. There's something happening. Wasn't this the plot of 6 Degrees of Separation? I'm going to have to look that up. They let those people in because they were black. It was a way of acknowledging that they didn't believe all black people were criminals. A canny black criminal would take advantage of that. Maybe next episode I'll do at least a description of 6 Degrees of Separation. I am curious of what is that, a movie? A book? We'll check it out next episode. Maybe that'll be the intro. Or they're scared old people who need a place to stay for tonight. We'll send them away in the morning. I'll never be able to sleep with strangers in the house. Come on. Clay did wonder. Maybe the $1,000 was a ruse. Or there was something worth more than that in the house. He couldn't think straight at this point. I think I've seen them before, I'm telling you, Amanda said, feeling frustration of being unable to recall a specific word. What if this was a revenge killing? He was some man she had slighted years ago. Clay knew that he was not good with faces. And he knew that maybe, on some level, he was especially not good with black faces. He wasn't going to say, they all looked the same to me. But there was some evidence, actual biological, scientific evidence, that people were more adept at recognizing people of the same race. Like, it wasn't racist, was it, to admit that 1 billion Chinese people probably looked more like one another to him than they did to another? I don't think we know him, and I don't think he's going to murder us, he said. There was now some sliver, needle sharp, of hope. I think we need to let them stay. It's the right thing to do, honey. I want to see proof. There was no way that she could make such a demand. I mean, we have keys too. Maybe they rented it before us and made copies. This is their vacation house, honey. It won't be on their license. I'll talk to them. If I get a bad feeling, we'll say no. Sorry, we're not comfortable with this arrangement. But if I don't, I think we should let them stay. They are old. I wish I had your faith in other people, Amanda said, and did not in fact envy Clay for this trait. It's the right thing to do, Clay said. He knew this would work. His wife felt it important. Not to do the moral thing necessarily, but to be the kind of person who would. Morality was vanity in the end of the day. Amanda crossed her arms against her chest. She was right in that she didn't know the whole story, nor did Clay, nor did the people in the kitchen, nor did the junior editor who, seeing the news, crossed the wire, issued the alert to the millions of people who had the New York Times app installed on their phones. The wind was so fierce, but even if it hadn't been, they likely would have been just too far from the flight path to hear the first planes dispatched to the coast, per protocol in that situation. We're going to be good Samaritans. Clay turned the television off and stood, choosing in that moment not to mention the $1,000. Thank you for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe, baby.
We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.